Behold once more, ladies and gentlemen, the great sword known only as Enma, the guardian of hell. Marvel at the splendid craftsmanship that make up this Owazamono grade sword, the temper pattern, the devilish appearance, wielded by Oden Kozuki, one of the only swords to slice into the Yonko Kaidio and causing him intense pain. Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on with this sword in the last chapter. I'm, of course, referring to chapter 1032 of One Piece. Spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't seen it. But, yeah, we're going to be talking about this today. Alright, there's a lot of stuff going on right now with Enma. A lot of crazy stuff. So let's just start off with the straight-up facts, okay? So, Zoro is currently fighting against King, who I may remind you is a Pteranodon Lunarian constantly on fire who wears a BDSM gimp suit, okay? Just the facts. We're only on the facts right now. Is everybody following along with this? Okay. Anyway, he's fighting against King, trying to figure out how to defeat him. Zoro gets knocked down, and before he can get back up, Enma begins to emanate. I'm assuming it's coming from the sword, because they're outside right now in Onigashima. Nobody's really around them. Nobody's getting close to this battle right now between two titans, right? So I'm assuming it's coming out of the sword. Zoro hears the sound of a shamisen playing. And then, before he can even think about, like, where is it coming from, or what's going on with a shamisen playing right now, maybe he got hit so hard, he's like, am I hallucinating? Enma begins to absorb the Haki out of Zoro's arm the same way it did when he first picked it up, okay? And so we cut away from that, and then we see, in the treasure repository, we see Orochi hanging out, and Komurasaki, Hiyori, is there playing the shamisen, and Orochi is approaching her, and then end of chapter. So a lot of it is just like, okay, what's going on here? There's something going on connected to Enma, and Hiyori, and Orochi, and the shamisen, and, you know, what's all this happening? You know, what's going on here? Okay. And, you know, there's a lot of questions to ask, but I guess one of the first questions is, you know, is Enma creating the sound of the shamisen that's creating, like, maybe the hallucination of Hiyori? Like, is Hiyori even really there? Or is it Hiyori really being there playing the shamisen that, like, activated Enma to draw the Haki out of Zoro? I'm guessing it might be the latter, because I really would like, you know, Hiyori to actually be present on Onigashima right now. But that got me looking into the history of Enma a little bit, going back to see it. Because I was curious, because it was mentioned by Tenguyama Hitetsu from before that Zoro and Oden were not the only people that tried to wield Enma. Other samurai, other very worthy samurai, have attempted to pick up Enma in the past, and they all failed. None of them could do it. And I was curious as to whether or not that was before or after Oden had the sword, because it was crafted by Kozaburo Shimosuke, and he lived like, well, he left Wano like 55 years ago, so it had to be before that. He also crafted the Wado, of course. So I'm thinking, okay, what if he created the Enma, and then gave it to Sukiyaki, Oden's father, and the Kozuki clan, and is like, when you have a son that'll be the next shogun, you give him the Enma. That will be my masterpiece, okay? And then Tenguyama was the one that created the Ame no Habakiri, okay? I'm assuming Tenguyama and Kozaburo were, like, really good friends, maybe rivals, like maybe the two best swordsmiths in all of Wano, or the land, or something like that. So if that was the case, and Oden was the first samurai to actually have the blade, maybe the reason it absorbs the Haki out of others was directly because of Oden's influence. Like, Oden poured so much of his Haki into this, any other samurai that tried to pick it up just simply couldn't measure up to the power. It's just like, Oden's sword! He was such a manly samurai! I can't! And so that's what happened and why nobody else could wield it. I don't think that's the case, though. I think what happened was Kozaburo crafted the sword, and then after that, a few samurai tried to pick it up, but they couldn't wield it. Like, the way Kozaburo made the thing allowed for Haki to be absorbed, okay? And after Oden passed away, and he left Ame no Habakiri to Momo, and he left Enma to Hiyori in the care of Tenguyama Hitetsu, I don't think any other samurais wielded the sword in that 20-year time period. Mostly because, well, for a few reasons. Number one, Tenguyama really respects Oden's wishes, and is like, no, these swords are meant for his children, no one else will get them. And there were rebellions. Like, remember, Ashura Doji's men all died 10 years into, you know, after Orochi took over 10 years ago, because they could not wait for the prophecy, because they were like, hey, we're getting older, and we can't wait for this 20-year time prophecy to happen. They don't even know if it's going to happen. It's like, we got to take action now. And Tenguyama, of course, would not have given up to them anyway. So, yeah, I think he's just had it in his possession since then. So, yeah, that's the situation. Also, Orochi, I think, had a vested interest in trying to find the swords. Like, you mean to tell me Oden's swords are somewhere in Wano? Find them and destroy them! You know, something like that. So that's for all those reasons. I don't think a single person, I think it was like Oden, and then he died, and the next person to touch Enma was Zoro in that 20-year period. And that was directly because Hiyori told Tenguyama to give it to him. So the question also remains, how exactly did Kozaburo make this thing? If that's the way it was from the very beginning, like, what kind of metal did he use? Because it is sort of like a cursed sword. I mean, it kind of is. It pretty much is. But it has the ability to absorb Haki from others, so it's affecting your willpower in some way, shape, or form, okay? So that's the first question. What did Kozaburo even do to make this thing? Maybe he made the sword like normal, but maybe it was like his masterpiece. I mean, he also made the Wado Ichimonji, and the Enma were both made by the same person, but maybe Enma was his masterpiece and he poured like his blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, and maybe it was because of that it led to the nature of the sword. Might be something similar to the Shodai Katetsu, all the different Katetsu blades. It's the idea that maybe the person that crafted the sword, Katetsu, way back in the day might have been insane, or he might have been like a murderer or something, and like his got imprinted on the blades somehow, which turned the Katetsu blades into cursed blades, okay? How exactly do you create a cursed blade exactly, right? So, at the end of the day, if you can't pick up Enma without possibly dying, then it is cursed. Like, that is a curse right there, okay? So, just gonna lay that there. Now, was the Enma creating the effect of the shamisen, like that shamisen, like, sound, that Japanese lute? Was it coming from the Enma, and that led to the moment at the end of the chapter when Komurasaki or Hiyori was there at Onigashima and Orochi saw her and everything? Was it Enma that caused that? Or was it because Komurasaki or Hiyori was at Onigashima playing the shamisen was the thing that activated Enma the way it did? As if Enma could, like, hear the notes of the shamisen being played by Hiyori. And remember, Hiyori is Oden's daughter, the person that he left the sword to, and that's the reason why Enma was responding to that. Like, Hiyori and Enma have some sort of, you know, spiritual connection. I don't really think there's any way you can get around what happened in the last chapter without involving Enma having some kind of will or sentience of its own, or some level of Haki, or some deeper connection between the two beyond just the fact that, like, Oden had the sword and he gave it to his daughter and that was it. You know, there has to be something else there, even if you want to say, like, oh, well, maybe a little bit of Oden's will or Oden's Haki still resides in the blade, so it carries on his spirit. And the fact that he left it to Hiyori, and then Hiyori is now on Onigashima playing the shamisen, that's what the sword reacted to and started to absorb Zoro's Haki. Because Zoro, the first time he picked it up, it began to suck him dry, so to speak. And he was like, okay, wait, and he had to play like tug of war with Enma in order to get his Haki back. But after training with it for a period of time, a couple of days, they didn't have a long time to train, but a couple of days training with it in Curry, he seemed ready to go with Enma. Like, he was heading to Onigashima, he was using Enma just as he did with his other three swords. For a while there, I thought Zoro was going to keep Enma sheathed and only use it when he was fighting a serious battle, like against King or Kaido or one of the other All-Stars. Like, he wasn't going to bust out Enma for just, like, the foot soldiers of the Beast Pirates. But he did. We see him taking out Enma along with the Sandai and the Wado and using all three of them just like he normally did, right? Because he's, you know, Santoryu. That's what he does, right? So it seemed like he had a good handle on it. There was a little bit of troubling, you know, when he was fighting Kaido and everything. It was taking a lot out of him. It was definitely a sword that was exhausting him a lot more than all the other blades he's used up to that point. And then getting all of his bones broken by both Yonko as a combination attack didn't really help so much. And now, yes, he was recovered using the medicine from Zo, but it's like, Zoro's health and his status right now is really up in the air, okay? Because not only is like, okay, here's this medicine, it'll momentarily block your pain and heal you of all your wounds, but then also you have a sword that, like, absorbs your Haki, so how are those two things gonna really, you know, counteract with each other, right? It's like, okay, you have a broken arm. Now, I have a magic medicine here that'll heal your broken arm. But at the same time, you gotta wear 50,000-pound weights on your other arm. Have fun, Zoro! It's just like, I don't know. It's like, I guess one or the other. What's gonna happen, right? Okay. Now, I like to think that Hiyori is really there. I don't like to think, I threw it out as an idea, just like, okay, well, maybe she is a hallucination, maybe it is something like that, but I don't want that to be the case, because for one thing, we haven't seen Hiyori in a while. We haven't really touched base with her ever since the raid began, and also, it's like, she has a vested interest here. She even told Zoro directly. Zoro was like, after the whole thing with Yasuie and everything, at the Rasetsu town and all that stuff, Zoro was like, I'm gonna be the one to kill Orochi, and Hiyori's like, listen, I greatly admire you. There's a little bit of a vibe there between Hiyori and Zoro. Maybe they'll become a couple. I don't know, but there's a little bit of a thing there. But Hiyori's like, look, thank you for offering to help. Thank you for you and the Straw Hats to be here to help avenge my father and help out the Scabbards. You definitely serve a place in this fight, Zoro, and I'll give you Enma, my father's sword. However, Hiyori says, I have to be the one to kill Orochi. I have to be the one to finish him off. It's what my whole life has been leading up to. You know, both of my parents died, and I haven't seen my brother in 20 years. And you can imagine Hiyori, like, throughout her life, and I should do a whole video just on Hiyori, because I haven't yet, and, like, her story is like, yeah, Momo just skipped over 20 years. Yeah, he has a plight and a struggle on his own, trying to live up to his father and everything like that, to be as awesome as Oden is, or everybody thinks that he should be as awesome as Oden is, and Momo's like, I don't know if I can live up to my father. Yeah, he has all that going on, but Hiyori's story is different, and even more powerful, I would say, because she actually lived through these 20 years, okay, and started, like, she was 6 when her parents were murdered, okay? She was 6, and then living with Kawamatsu for a little while, and then eventually on her own in the capital, and then Denjiro found her and everything. But you have to imagine, Hiyori probably living her life very similar to Denjiro, where Denjiro was like, alright, I'm gonna be, oh shit, what was his name? Koshiro! That was it! I was like, oh, what was the cover name now? Koshiro. He's like, I'm gonna be Koshiro. I'm gonna be the head of the Yakuza, and I'm gonna be the one that kind of lives in the shadows as Orochi's right-hand man, and then when the opportunity strikes, I'm gonna, like, slit his throat in the night, okay? But then Denjiro met Hiyori, and then they started to have this plan together where Hiyori's going to become Komurasaki and become the greatest Oiran in all of Wano. Orochi becomes smitten with her, and you know what? I bet Hiyori even had the same kind of conversation she had with Zoro with Denjiro, because you know Denjiro was like, alright, I've already established myself as the head of the Yakuza, as, you know, Koshiro, everybody knows who I am, and I'm just going to eventually use that position to find out when Orochi's weakness is, and I'm just going to end him, right? And he was all ready to do that, okay? He was letting the years go by, but then maybe Hiyori was like, Denjiro, let me be the one to do it. I know you want to kill him just as much as everybody else. All the other Scabbards would want to kill Orochi, but I have to be the one to do it, okay? To avenge my mother and my father and all of Wano. This is my birthright, almost. This is what I have to do, okay? And so maybe Denjiro was like, okay, I won't do it. Because you feel like Denjiro had a lot of opportunities to maybe assassinate Orochi, but, you know, once again, maybe Denjiro was waiting for the 20 years. He was really confident in Toki's prophecy, and he's like, yeah, I mean, like, he seemed to have, like, banquets at Orochi's place, like, every Thursday night or whatever, so there was opportunities, sure, but he never did it, because he was like, you know what, if I try to assassinate him and it doesn't work, like, and by the way, as it implies, it probably would not have worked, at least if he tried to go. Has anybody tried to stab him other places other than, like, decapitating him? Has anybody tried to stab Orochi in the heart, or maybe even the lungs, the liver, anywhere else on his body? Hack off a limb? You know, everyone seems to go right for the head, and that doesn't seem to be working. In fact, it's almost like Orochi is, like, inviting it when he turns into an 8-headed serpent. It's like, oh, 8-headed serpent, let's, you know, that's a lot of neck. Let's go for the neck, right? And so it's like, he's like, yes, decapitate me all you want, you foolish samurai! I am the Orochi! I cannot die! You know, just like, oh, okay, well, let me just stab you in the lung or hack off an arm, and just like, I cannot regrow arms! Who stabbed someone in the arm? You know, that would be pretty funny. And maybe that was the plan, and actually it kind of was the plan, because remember, Denjiro, in the months leading up to the prophecy, Denjiro was like, hide these blood packs in your kimono, Komurasaki, so if the time ever comes where I have to, quote-unquote, cut you down, then, you know, the blood sacs will rupture, and it'll look like you die, and then, you know, your plan can continue, and perhaps that was Hiyori's plan from the beginning. Like, it wasn't like, oh, the Straw Hats showed up, so we had to modify the plan. No, what if Hiyori's plan from day one was become an Oiran, get Orochi to be obsessed with me, and then I'll die. And then I'll show up right when he's least expecting it, and he will be so confused and so filled with, like, happiness that his lost love has come back from the grave. He will be so vulnerable in that point. That's when Hiyori, the shamisen actually conceals. Oh my god, that would be so cool! The shamisen actually has a sword in it. That would be perfect, and that damn shamisen has been a relevant part of this arc ever since day one, because literally Wano is a kabuki play, and the accompaniment for starting Wano, like the curtain literally opens on the Wano Kuni arc in like chapter 909, and it's Komurasaki playing the shamisen. When Act 1 and Act 2 starts and Act 2 ends and all that stuff, when acts begin and end, it's the shamisen accompanying it. Which also means now that Hiyori is back in the story, maybe Act 3 will be ending soon. Maybe Act 3 will end in the next chapter, because she's there playing the shamisen, so it's like, the next chapter is, Orochi comes in, like, oh my god, Komurasaki, I missed you! And he's like, I missed you too, my lord. And then Orochi's like, on her lap, and just like, we're together forever. It's like, yes, we will be. And then she like twists the shamisen, and then sword comes out, and then you just see, like, in silhouette, her bringing down the knife, and then just blood splattering everywhere. And then dun 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 dun. Act 3 over. Makes sense to me. I could see that happening. Can you see that happening? I could see that happening, right? And you're like, oh, when's Act 3 going to end? When, you have the worst generation going up against Kaido and Big Mom? No. When Kaido literally lifts up the entire island of Onigashima surrounded by flaming clouds? No. When Kaido Kanabos Luffy home runs him, Babe Ruths him off the side of the mountain? No. When Momo transforms into an adult and becomes the mighty Peach Dragon of lore? No. When, I don't know, when Frankie fires a laser beam through a flying triceratops? No! It's, right there when Hiyori brings down the knife on Orochi, and it's like, oh, is he really dead this time? That's when it ends. And then going into Act 4 would be much shorter, much, it would just be like the final battles, essentially. Like, final battle, the climax with Big Mom, and then the final battle with Kaido, and then, like, all the remaining fights and everything like that. And then Act 4 wouldn't be that long, and then Act 5 would be the speedy conclusion. I'm still kind of hoping on the 5-act structure. And then we'd also have a chapter in between as, like, a cover for that, right? So I like to think Hiyori is definitely there. She's not a hallucination, which would mean that her playing the shamisen is giving out a signal that Enma is responding to. Almost like Enma is absorbing Zoro's Haki so it can, like, join the fight or, be reunited with Komurasaki or something. I don't know, man. What if it's like, what if it is Oden's will? And what if it's like Oden's will on the sword, like, I want my daughter to have a really epic blade to finish off Orochi, so it will absorb the Haki of everybody that touches it, and then it will give that, like, because Komurasaki is not, like, a samurai. She hasn't had that kind of training. But what if it's like she actually tries to wield Enma? Because we've never seen her actively pick up the sword and try to wield it. Because she didn't own it. I mean, she owned it, but she didn't actually have it in her possession. It was in the possession of Tenguyama for 20 years. And then when Tenguyama took the sword out, it seemed like that was the first time he actually revealed the existence of those swords since Oden died. He had to keep those safe from Orochi's men. And it's like, okay, Ame no Habakiri, it's supposed to be yours, Momo. And Momo's like, I don't want it. And he's like, okay, Enma, this goes to Zoro. So it's not like, he hands Enma over to Hiyori first or anything like that. He just gives it right to Zoro, and it proceeds to absorb his Haki. Well, what if it's like, if Hiyori, when she actually does pick up the sword, if that actually ever happens, like, let's say, I don't know, okay, let's say Zoro is fighting against King outside, and he manages to finish him off, like, he cuts King down. And then the effects of the medicine wear off, and then, his Haki's getting absorbed, and Zoro, like, passes out, and he's, like, on the ground, like, and he passes out and drops Enma, and just because of, like, happen chance or whatever, or because of fate, whatever you want to say, Enma, like, falls down in a crack in the island, and it ends up in the room where, Hiyori is with Orochi. Like, maybe the treasure repository is, like, really close to where King and Zoro are fighting right now, and so it falls, and, like, it lands right next to Hiyori, and Hiyori picks it up, and it's like, it doesn't absorb her life force. It doesn't absorb her Haki because she's the one meant to use it. Rather, the exact opposite. All of the Haki from all of the samurai it has absorbed up until then, all the samurai of Wano, Oden, as well as Zoro, comes out in like a giant anime death blade, and it's like, that's the thing she uses to kill Orochi. Like, she tries to stab him, but it doesn't work, and then Orochi actually finally reveals, like, Komurasaki, you betrayed me! He's like, do you not know my power is the Yamato no Orochi? I cannot be killed! I am invincible! And then that's when Hiyori reveals that she's Hiyori. I'm not even Komurasaki, I am the daughter of Oden. You're Oden's daughter! Oh, I have so many conflicting feelings about that. But anyway, I will avenge you, Komurasaki! And that's when Enma falls, and she's like, okay, whatever, thanks, Dad. And then, boom! Anime Death Saber! It's like when Trunks was fighting against Zamasu, and the giant spirit blue sword comes out. It's like a giant death Haki blades coming out. And she's like, wow, that's cool. And then she doesn't really have any sort of, it's like, just press A at that point. Like, press A to kill the boss. You don't have to have any skill here. It's like, okay, beep, and then Orochi just gets sliced in half, and so much condensed Haki is in that sword that it's like no devil fruit power is going to save you, and he just dies. That makes sense, right? Okay. I'm following that logic a lot more than the whole hallucination aspect of it, okay? Or the fact that Enma is like some kind of like Zanpakuto-esque sword, and it has like the spirits of others inside of it. You know, like a ghostly image of like Oden appears behind Hiyori, like a Jedi spirit, and it's just like, you did okay, my daughter. You avenged my death. And she's like, Dad! And then he's like, he just fades away. You did well. And it's like, and then that's the end. Like, you know, something like that. I mean, maybe that might happen. I don't know. But, yeah, I don't think it's like Zoro's awakening his Zanpakuto. He's gonna go Bankai! Which would be, I mean, what would Zoro's Bankai be? Okay, the first thing that came to mind when I just thought of Zoro's Bankai, a giant shark. You following me so far? A giant shark, like a megalodon shark, with stars all over its body, red demon eyes, and just swords just coming out of every single part of it. Like, instead of a fin, it just has a giant blade, kind of like the blade that Hordy used. And then it's like, it's every part of its body has swords coming out of it, and then it has, like, Enma in its teeth. And its teeth are also metal. Its teeth are also swords, okay? That was Zoro's Bankai. And it just floats above him, and it's like it floats above him like it's like in the water, and it just goes around and just shreds any enemy around it. Like, it can literally just spin like this and just wipe out everybody around Zoro. That's Zoro's Bankai, alright? You can name it in the comments down below. But anyway, yeah, that's what I have an idea for, I guess. That's a solidified idea. Let's go with Hidden Blade in the Shamisen. Hiyori tries to kill Orochi. She can't because of his Devil Fruit. And then Enma, after Zoro defeats King, Enma falls down and finds its way to Hiyori. She picks it up, Giant Haki, Death Saber, and then Orochi dies. Let's go with that theory. I'm locking myself into that. Alright, so now let's move on to the final part of this video, which is, of course, time and tested dinosaur facts. Although this time, it's not so much dinosaur, it's more pterosaur, because we have King right now, and he's a Pteranodon, and he showed the ancient lost technique of how pteranodons hunted their prey back during the Cretaceous period. But so, no, today we're not talking about pteranodons. Today, for pterosaur facts, we're talking about the Quetzalcoatlus. Alright. I have always loved this pterosaur, alright? When I was a kid, I was probably around maybe like 11 or 12 years old, I remember, I think it was the History Channel that came out with a special called Last Day of the Dinosaurs. And it's on YouTube. I've actually watched it recently. And it's just this idea of, like, you know, what happened in the last few days before the meteor hit, and then what happened, like, immediately after, okay? And it spotlights a few dinosaurs. Like, there's a pair of Triceratops, there's a pair of Quetzalcoatlus. So it was a really good special, and I always loved the Quetzalcoatlus because they were just giant, like, think of a pterodactyl, but way bigger and way more, like, bird-like with, like, feathers and stuff, okay? So the Quetzalcoatlus had the largest wingspan of any animal that's ever existed on this planet that we know of. I mean, we could always find something else that we've never discovered before, but it had the longest wingspan of any animal at 33 feet, a 10-meter long wingspan, okay? And these things stood so tall, they were comparable to giraffes. So just imagine if giraffes had giant wings and were flying around the sky. That's how big these Quetzalcoatlus were, okay? And it's not a surprise they were actually discovered in Texas, because everything's bigger in Texas. Yep. And so the fossil records were discovered in Texas. One fossil was discovered that was pretty big, and then another fossil was discovered shortly after that was a lot smaller, and the first indication was like, oh, okay, what if it was like the parent and then like the child? But then later on, some new research came about, and it's like it might have actually just been a very similar species. So not a Quetzalcoatlus, but a similar species. Along that point, there's some species that are similar to Quetzalcoatlus that have more like blunt beaks, and then the Quetzalcoatlus had much more protruding, kind of like Pteranodon, kind of like King, had the long beak or whatever. But just looking at these images, these artist renditions of what these things looked like, how big they were. Here's a chart comparing a human to like a giant dragonfly that lived. Everything was bigger during the late Cretaceous period, okay? Because I think there was a lot more oxygen, so insects and stuff can grow a lot bigger. There were giant centipedes. I mean, there still kind of are giant centipedes in our world, but even bigger. Giant dragonflies, giant insects, proportional to the level of oxygen that was in the atmosphere. But these Quetzalcoatlus, man, they were massive beyond reproach. I mean, these things coming at you from the sky, I mean, these things were literally so big. Like, in our world, like, you could see these things coming down and probably devouring, like, small horses or, like, ponies or whatever. Like, these things were so damn massive, okay? And just, like, giant shovel beaks coming down and just taking a pony and just devouring it, right? They were named Quetzalcoatlus after Quetzalcoatl, who is the Aztec god of, well, actually, it was like a giant feathered serpent. So it may have looked like this. It also may have looked like this, or it might have been a sexy dragon maid. Not really sure. It was one of the three. Or maybe all three. I don't know. It was a god, right? There you go. So, yeah, that's the Quetzalcoatlus, though. It's a pretty damn impressive thing. Like, I would have loved to travel back. Well, I don't know if I would even survive. See, that's the thing. Like, you often wonder, like, what would it be like if humans traveled back to the Cretaceous period or the Dinosaur period? You know, what would it really be like? And it's like, well, you'd have to be worried about getting devoured by dinosaurs and giant, you know, Quetzalcoatlus. But I'm also thinking, like, wouldn't, like, diseases kill you first? Or, like, if an insect bites you, you're dead. You know, or, like, would there even be an adequate, like, there was a lot of oxygen in the air, so would you even be able to breathe correctly? Or would you even be able to do that, right? I'm not really sure, because if there's too much oxygen, that can actually, like, cause your eyes to go bloodshot, and you might not be able to breathe properly. That wouldn't be good. So, yeah. But if I could travel back in time in a sealed environmental suit, I would like to see the Quetzalcoatlus flying over and then go back to the future before they devour me, right? Okay, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. This will be Tekking and Barry and Zoro and Enma signing out. Later, everyone.